Good day, everyone. My name is Christian Kenneth M. Gahon, and today we are going to discuss about computer software. Yes, computer softwares, which is also known as the operating system, that we have been using it for decades and decades, and it is improving for the future. And we are going to talk about a little history of the computers and its technology that they've been made since back from 1990s. And also, we are going to talk about the technologies that they created that changes the world. So, we're going back to the 90s and we're going to discuss the evolution of this operating system. So, let's get started. The ENIAC, also known as the Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer, was built in 1943 by John Mauchly and John Presper Eckert. Yes, these two great inventors made the first electronic general-purpose computer which it can solve large amount of numbers using programming. Yes, imagine that using programming you can solve large numbers, which is requested by the U.S. Military Commission for new equipment for World War II. But unfortunately, it was released in 1945 when the World War II ended. This machine was so huge and it was built up with 18,000 vacuums, not just a vacuums, that's the vacuum tubes, along with 7,000 resistors and 1,500 relays, 6,000 manual switches, and approximately it has 5 million hand soldered joints. Imagine that you are having a computer right now with that many components. It must be a quite experience on how to use a computer just for handling big numbers in programming. So, we move on for the next computer they made. Fast forward to 1949, after the ENIAC has been shut down in 1948, EDSAC and EDVAC has born. EDSAC, also known as the Electronic Delay Storage Automatic Calculator, was the first storage machine for storing programs on an electronic computer. Yes, it is invented by Maurice Wilkes as a British scientist, pioneer, and inventor of microprogramming. And also, he operates the EDSAC for 10 years, which is also long, which is they build another computer, which is also called the EDVAC, the Electronic Discrete Variable Automatic Computer, and was the first computer that can do mathematical equation like addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication, which has a memory of 1,000 word capacity, and it was improved to 1,024 words. And we are going to move on to the next computer. After the EDSAC and the EDVAC has been discontinued in 1948, the BINAC, also known as the Binary Automatic Computer, rises. It was the only first automatic computer product was invented by the one of the Eckert and Mauchly Computer Corporation in 1949. But later on, it became a division product of the Remington Rand Corporation, known as the best typewriter manufacturer in the world. Moving on after 2 years, Mauchly and Eckert introduced another computer, which is also known as the UNIVAC, or also known as the Universal Automatic Computer, was discovered in 1950s, and also it is the very first general purpose electronic digital computer in the world. The UNIVAC has 16,000 pounds of hardware machine and 5,000 vacuum tubes that can perform about 1,000 calculations per second. The first computer language was the Fortran, which is derived from Formula Translator. invented in 1954 by John Bacchus, a Bachelor of Mathematics in Columbia University. But it was officially launched in 1957 with a shortened process of computer programming, which is it is more accessible. Did you know that they created Fortran 1, not 2, but 3, which is down by now, unfortunately. Despite of its old, which is 62 years old by now, it is still usable for many physicists out there because they believe that they can make large scale of astronomical modeling of stars, and they use it too in hydrodynamics coding. We're going further and further to the modern era. After a decade ago, with the biggest computers that ever existed around us, we are now entering in the second generation of computers, which is the beginning of sharing data in many users to in different computers, as well as storing data on the magnetic tapes and magnetic disk on a secondary stage of the second generation, which is the secondary storage devices like hard disk, like we used to store as an extra backups and something. We're gonna tackle about that later. If you ever heard the word processors, the number one that comes into your minds are chips, circuits, motherboards, and also inside parts of the CPU that you can see if you are just setting up your CPU. The number of computers in the early 1960s is increasing, leads to experimenting the time sharing computer system, which it can support many, like hundred thousands, millions of people who can share the computer to other users because they are improving single connecting chips processors to increase its reliability. The computers in that generation can connect to each other, which some common computers in that era has the multi-user system, which is many people can can go online at the same time, which is the users are mixed with business people, students, banks employees, researchers, and even military personnel. This is the modernization of the computers. Please welcome the mini computers. Yes, in my opinion, mini computers are much more cheaper than the regular computers. And especially, it has the ability to do multitasking also. Mini computers are used in engineering computations, database management, and file handling. Oh, and also, mini computers are also known as the mid-range computers, which is relatively high power in the capacity in manufacturing process and control in laboratory equipments. Fun fact, do you know that the world's smallest disk was invented in 2016 by the Dutch scientists, which the size of the hard disk was 0.87 inches, just like the size of a postal stamp. IBM made it with a removable disk pack. It was a 6 disk and it has a capacity of 2 million characters. Imagine that the disk can be rotated at 1,500 RPM and it weigh around 10 pounds. The advantages of both tapes and discs, they are both relatively low rental with less versatile storage, but it can improve for more versatile storage, which they can lead to a new phase of these storages. The computer mouse that we are using today has so many features, which has it is similarities on the older mouse in the 1960s, which is invented by Douglas Engelbart. The first model was a single wheel in pair, which is has the control to do the motion of the mouse into the cursor, which is displays on the screen, just like we are using today, but it is more like a big type of mouse in the 1960s. But today the mouses that we are using right now is more comfortable to use. Unlike in the 1960s, it was huge and one button only. Introducing the ULSI microprocessor generation. The Intel 4004 was the first microprocessor with a general-purpose CPU on a single chip in the world by Federico Fagin, an Italian-American physicist, engineer, inventor, and also an entrepreneur. It is released in March 1967 because many people want to know the full potential of microprocessor. Before, it was a little bit confusing to many people because many people using the same system, but in this generation, there are many integral components in computers which is good for the users to use in public, like calculators, automatic teller machines or ATMs, and other businesses systems which we are still using it today. Welcome to the Unix. Unix was originally spelled as Unix, which stands for Uniplex Information and Computing System, which is invented by Dennis Ritchie. He graduated in Harvard University with the degrees in physics and applied maths. After he graduated, he works from Ken Thompson as a computer scientist, and he is known as a developer in C programming in 1968. But for the short, Unix is an operation system that has a multitasking in all forms like PCs, laptops, tablet, and more. Welcome to the Ethernet. Ethernet was invented by Bob Metcalfe, which he invented the Ethernet network system in 1980s for connecting advanced computers to send data from one another with a high-speed printers. Ethernet are way more faster than wireless connection because it is a high-level connection which has more high level on security. The difference between the internet and the Ethernet was the internet is a wide area network, which means it can be anywhere. Unlike Ethernet, which is also known in local area network, which is it is used in LAN, internet is more worldwide large network that connects a large group of numbers of devices around the world. Like unlike Ethernet, Ethernet is a network that covers a small geographical area, which means it has to be a specific place to get a Ethernet connection. Like in PC, you have a wire to connect it, or somewhere that place that has a local area network servers. Physical computers in the 90s are composed of input and output devices like monitor, keyboard, mouses, CPUs, and more. Charles Babbage, an English mathematician graduate, and he is also known as the inventor of computer in 1880s, made his first computer in the way back from 1860s. But if we're looking back from 1940s, like we talk about the ENIAC, EDVAC, EDSAC, BINAC, and UNIVAC, they are more like a hybrid type of computers. IBM introduced their first physical computer, and afterwards, computer companies are begin licensing their MS-DOS, which has no graphical interface and required users to type in a simple and complex commands in order to run a program. Osborne 1 was introduced with 5-inch display with 64 kilobyte memory with two 5.25-inch floppy disk drive, which is the Web by Minitel, which they has 10 million of users by 1990s, and it has services like newspapers, train schedules, and more. Lastly, the DD Arms, also known as the Direct Drive Arms, a robot-like built by Takeo Kanade, as the prototype build with electric motors. See, many of that can help us in the future, which is we are using it today in industries and other companies, like in robotics and mechanical companies. We do all know that Bill Gates and Paul Allen was the richest man in the world. They started their partnership in April 4, 1975, which they create the most worldwide known operating system known as the Microsoft. It is became one of the largest corporation in the United States and also in the world, which they place one of them in the richest man in the world, which is Bill Gates. And of course, we know that Bill Gates has a rival with his Microsoft, entering the Apple computers. Apple Computers was founded by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in April 1st, 1976. They brought the new version in the Apple company that they want to make a computer with more user-friendly. They launched their first product from Apple One in Steve Jobs' garage. Imagine that. You, Steve Jobs, an undergraduate person that can build his product, his own device in their garage. And they managed them to solve them without a monitor, keyboard, and casing, which they launched it in 1977. Microsoft founders Bill Gates and Paul Allen start making computer software on April 4th, 1975, which the Microsoft releases its first operating system known as the Windows 1. The Microsoft founder Bill Gates ran the top MS-DOS, which is as command line input. Then after that, Steve Jobs heard the news that he managed to release his first product too, which the first Macintosh was, or also known as the Mac, Apple Mac, was launched on January 24 in 1984 by Steve Jobs, which was the first successful personal computer manufactured by Apple Corporation. The Macintosh project started in the late 1970s with Jeff Raskin that he works in 1943 to 2005. An average, an average Apple employee who envisioned an easy-to-use, low-cost computer for the average consumer. It became more successful because this is the first personal computer with graphic interface complete with mouse and keyboard. How amazing Steve Jobs can be. But the rivalry is not done yet. 2 years later, the Windows 2.0 released, and then it is released with two options, one for the 286 chip and one for the new 386 chip. After that, Windows took itself in some advantage to run multiple products like a multitasking. Since computers can run apps without having so much horsepower, and still, the Apple and the Microsoft was still challenging themselves in making a much better technologies. The GNU Linux is an operating system with a complete free software system with an upward compatible Unix. The GNU stands for GNU's Not Unix, which is invented by Rich Stallman. Richard Stallman started his MIT career as he worked in a group where they are using free software. GNU was launched in September 1983, which was the GNU system resulted in a complete operating system called the GNU Linux system. They made a free software activities to maintain the modification free version of the Linux, which is also called the Linux Libre. The first virus that ever existed was the brain boot sector virus. Also known, they are the most destructive in the 1986. But it has no harm on many users' data. The virus was targeted by the IBM PC platforms, MS-DOS operating systems, and more. It was created by two brothers from Pakistan, which is the name is Basit Farooq Alvi and Ahmad Farooq Alvi. But their virus was not made to destroy or to corrupt any data. It was leaving you on a hidden message, and it has a pirated data that can be used anywhere, and it can be used for many purposes. The final operation unit for Apple was the iOS. The iOS stands for iPhone Operating System. It is also known for the greatest presentation ever that the Apple's corporation by Steve Jobs, which he introduced the first iPhone in the world in January 9th, 2007. Then the iOS is already with the older mobile operating system in active development today. iPhones didn't support multitasking, and it can't support third-party apps. Instead, they have their own apps like Mobile Safari web browser, which is the first mobile web browser that nearly as powerful as a desktop browser. And finally, the last operation system that we had them for decades, the Android OS. The Android 1.0 was the first release in 2008, which doesn't have a code name. But the software had included the applications of Google like Gmail, Maps, Calendar, and YouTube, which is integrated in the operating system that they employ today. Android powers hundreds of millions of mobile devices in more than 190 countries around the world. It is the largest installed base of any mobile platform, and it is still growing fast. Every day, there are more 1 million new Android devices that are activated worldwide. Users can jump from one task to another and at the same time, various applications can run simultaneously. Like how crazy that fast compared to the vacuum tubes and other generations. They have also tutorials that can teach you how to develop and package an Android application. An Android OS starts their system from their environment setup for other Android application programming, and they still drilling it down to look more various aspects of Android applications. In terms of web browsers, it is based on the open source WebKit layout. Yes, they use WebKit layout engine coupled with Chrome's V8 or version 8 JavaScript engine supporting with HTML5 and the CSS3. In terms of storage, SQLite and a lightweight relational database is used for data storage purposes. Android users nowadays has the most powerful feature that has Android company has to offer, from Android 1 to Android 10 to 11 and so on, which is today it has still a room for improvement with the light features for the future.